back. This is Doug Fletcher, and you're listening to What's the Hazard? I'm here with my buddy Jim Steele. We just finished up a really interesting episode on the evolution of a safety mind and how we have evolved over the years, how we view and approach safety, which I think everyone is going to experience. I want to talk a little bit about hazard communication. You called me. I was on the road a couple days ago. You called we were just discussing Hazcom.
Right.
And, it's interesting because hazard communication has been the bane of so many people's existence. It is really, it's a really interesting regulation.
It's always the top cited.
It's always like the most frequently cited.
Right.
I'm not sure I could name anyone who's actually had an injury as a result of a Hazcom issue. I mean, chemicals certainly, but not necessarily Hazcom, but it gets cited all the time. It's easy, kind of what we refer to in the OSHA parlance as easy pickings, back in the old days. But, there's so many facets to it. An unlabeled container, citation. Don't have a data sheet, citation. Chemical inventory, doesn't have this on it, citation. I mean, it's really, I don't know, man. Is it really making people's lives safer all the time? I don't know.
Right.
But one of the big challenges that I've seen that you've experienced is safety data sheet management and the challenges that poses. So talk a little bit about what you guys are considering and the evolution of that process.
Well, I'd start off in case OSHA's listening to say we're 100% compliant, right? Exactly. We're 100% compliant.
Oh, yeah.
We do have challenges.
Right. Everyone does.
Yeah. So I think, part of the deal is that Hazcom was written before there were computers, right?
Right.
It was the idea was that you were going to have these 3-ring binders hanging by the time clock, and they would be accessible to everybody, and whenever they wanted, they could just go and, find the safety data sheet amongst the 15 3-ring binders that they had, and
which never happened.
Keep that up to date. Yeah, you're going to keep that up to date somehow.
Yeah.
But and people made, I think, a good effort at that. I've always made a good effort at trying to have those available. And then as computers became the predominant way that we wanted to have documents.
Yeah, manage documents.
That it makes sense. But then you have, how do you we have employees on the production line that they don't have a computer. They're not working with a computer. They do data entry. And so we're coming up with ways to make that readily available to them. And we have SharePoint is the way we're doing it now, by and large. And so we have someone that when we get a safety data sheet or a new chemical, we'll upload that to this SharePoint page, and SharePoint's evolving, and we're wondering if that's not the way to go with it, or if we want to go. We have another management system that's called IQMS that keeps track of everything in the plant, and it's from an accounting purpose. But in this database, you can put safety data. You could put safety data sheets in there, and you could affiliate them with whatever the product or the process that's going on, and people can pull those data sheets up. So we're looking at going to that program, but the accessibility for that actually is, so the question is that, so someone in the office doesn't necessarily then have that software program on their computer, and they might have to go to someone and ask them for the safety data sheet, which is prohibited, right? That
is the question, because OSHA has always said, you read the letters of interp, I know you've read them, you read the regulation, it says readily accessible.
Right.
And that has been interpreted to mean I shouldn't have to go through you to get to the data sheet. Right. I should have direct access to the data sheet.
Right.
And when it was a piece of paper hanging on the wall, as long as I could walk over to the binder, I had direct access, in theory, to a data sheet if I could find it in the thousands that were up there.
Yeah.
And so the electronic management of this has become, do all of my employees have that readily accessibility? What am I trying to say?
I think they get it. I don't know.
Can they get the data sheet? Is it easy to get? Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Sorry about that, Mom. My mom is just like, oh my God. So, that is the question. So if we use some type of an electronic system, is it readily accessible? That is the question. And so you posed the question to me, which was brilliant. What about Google?
Yeah.
Everybody's got a smartphone.
Yeah, everybody's got their phone. You can't, I mean, we have to prohibit people having their phone on the production floor, so they have to keep it in their locker. And we even have people now, get off the subject, but we have people that will sometimes put their earbuds in their, and then they put their headphones on or put the earmuffs over that, so that they can hear their secretly hidden cell phone that's down in their sock, you know.
Right. It seems to be very important to people to have.
Oh yeah, you can't get them away from it. So the question is, can someone just Google? You've got this chemical, you've got the label on it that's, you know, it's spring water, and here's the manufacturer. I can just look up the safety data sheet for that.
Right.
And it's right there. It's Google. And just say, okay, go to Google. And you can do it at home. You can do it in the bathroom.
Right, it's readily accessible. And
whatever.
That doesn't even mean they have to have their cell phones on their person. If they had them in their locker, they could walk to their locker and do the same thing.
Right. So
search.
Maybe the solution would be just having a list of safety data sheets, a list of chemicals with the manufacturer, have that posted on the wall, and just say, Google it.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting hypothesis. I was reading through letters of interpretation last night because we had this conversation just recently, and I honestly don't spend a lot of time in the hazard communication regulation because it's not something that's really imminent in most of my clients' work sites. And so I wasn't sure if anything had changed about that. I actually was Googling, you know, OSHA, SDS, Google.
Right.
On Google, trying to find out if something had been posted. But that is how we all access information. So it makes perfect sense that if an employee would know what to enter into the search engine, that would be a reasonable way of readily accessible.
And how the way that they would get that would be on the label, assuming you had it labeled. If it's a secondary label, they would have to go back to the original label, probably to find the manufacturer or whatever. But,
maybe. Yeah.
But they could do that's accessible to them. If they're using the chemical, they have the label.
It's a really interesting proposition, man. I don't know if OSHA has have an opinion on this or not at this point.
I haven't called to ask. I was hoping you would know. So it was funny. One of my meetings this morning, we were talking about that. We were kind of huddling up and trying to figure out the best way to manage this system. And they do have systems online that go out and search the web and that they pull them into their database. And so it's just constantly looking through the internet for safety data sheets and pulling them into their system. And then if you pay them, they want like $3,000 from us to do it a year. But then you can go in and you can search their database for your specific safety data sheet. And then you can just click on it. And then it becomes affiliated with you and it's in your list in your database. I think you can set up other criteria where you could put in what department it was and things like that.
I see.
And so then you would have all of those safety data sheets. Plus you have their whole database that if you couldn't find something, you would find it. You just click on it, and now it's on your list and it's part of your database. So
interesting. That's
kind of where we're leaning is going towards that.
Those services, it's actually a service that is designed to provide that.
Right.
Yeah, MSDS Online, for example, or some of these others.
Right.
I think 3E has that same service, and these have been around for quite a long time, some of them. And I would assume that they are fairly easy to navigate at this point. I can remember I was in a facility it's been a while ago. I was with OSHA, so it's been more than 8 years ago. But their process, they had kiosks set up in the facility, and this kiosk was basically a safety kiosk. They had a fire extinguisher. They might have had a first aid kit. They had a computer terminal. And you would sit down there, and you would go to this. I don't know if they had their own database established or if they were actually accessing a third party. You'd go in, and then you would just pull up the data sheet. And I thought, well, this is really cool. So I went over to this employee and I said, hey, man, would you show me how to obtain a data sheet? And he walked over to the computer kiosk and sat down and couldn't log in. Or there was, something happened that he couldn't make it work, threw up his hands and said, sorry, man. And I wrote him a citation, it was just that simple. I was like, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Citation. Back then it was only $7,000, so it was certainly less painful. But,
What is it now? Just
$13,653 or something.
Right now they've got it. Didn't they tag it to like cost of living increases or something like that?
So consumer price index.
Yeah,
so it does fluctuate with the consumer price index now. So it probably is different now, 2022, than it was last year. Or it's in the process of being
$13,000.
Now, again, that's
starting. They start there.
Yeah, that's the highest statutory maximum.
Right.
But that's a pretty high start, man. For not being able to obtain a data sheet using your books, or I mean, you used those books at one point. Those were absolutely untenable, man.
Well, they were pointless, right? They were. There
was some poor bastard that was assigned to have to put in new data sheets, pull out data sheets, archive data sheets. What a inventories. I mean, how do you keep a chemical inventory in an establishment that has more than 10 chemicals. I don't know how that's even possible.
I don't either. And when you have more than 10 people that are picking up their favorite WD-40,
right?
Off-brand, whatever.
If you got a maintenance department or mechanics or something in your facility, they're bringing their own stuff in.
Oh yeah,
because
they got
your
this
stuff
special
doesn't work the way they like it.
Grandpa used to make, right?
Yeah, so I've got a little concoction that works really well. So I just think there are so many aspects of hazard communication that are really difficult, and I think probably what's most important is that employees understand the hazards of the chemicals they're working with.
Right. Well, and that's something that's something that I would encourage if you're new and you're kind of doing it, is to start with a job hazard analysis.
Yes.
And if you write a job hazard analysis for each one of your jobs, that's basically you take the job, you break it down into its basic steps, and then for each step you go back and you identify what are the hazards that come up in each step, and then for each hazard you identify what the work rules are. And if you do that for each of your jobs, then you're going to have a ready-made list of the hazards. And where there's a chemical, that's going to come up. Well, I have to spray this stuff. Okay, well, what is that stuff? And you would list the safety data sheet and maybe a few of the hazards, but you just refer them to the safety data sheet. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I thought was putting a link to the data sheet in the JHA where those come up, and that would be their access. But they still, if they don't have computer access, if they're looking at a piece of paper, well,
I know, man. As I was searching around last night, I was watching TV with one eye and searching my computer with the other. I did find like SDS apps, like in the Google Play Store. You can download these SDS apps, but those are driving you to more generic SDSs. They may not be manufacturer specific. So if I wanted an SDS on acetone, I could enter acetone into this app on my smartphone, and I would get a data sheet for acetone. The reviews on this app were all very good, very useful. It was, easily used, whatever. Something like that might be the way this is moving in the future, where, just this.
It's the mixtures and things like that. It's this.
Oh, those are tough.
Proprietary stuff
yes.
that,
that's going to be very difficult.
It's toluene and acetone and benzene and whatever else all mixed together.
It's really tough. This is going to just perpetually be the most frequently cited for a number of reasons. I mean, in Nebraska, as you know, if an OSHA compliance officer initiates an inspection in a Nebraska facility, hazard communication, lockout, tagout, and powered industrial trucks get reviewed every time. So if you've had, like my buddy John Panapinto up at Lincoln Poultry has had 13 inspections in the last 18 months. Oh my God. 13 inspections in the last 18 months. And every time they ask for his Hazcom program, and he's like, you've got 12 copies of this in the office. And, those are all in different case files. They still actually have physical case files. Shove it in there. So in theory, they need one for every inspection. It's a giant pain in the ass, but it gets a lot of scrutiny. I guess that was my point.
Right.
They are going to look at Hazcom. And so that makes it, in large part, the most frequently cited because they're always looking at it.
Well, it comes out of, too, I think it comes out of a time in our history where where you didn't have a right to see the hazards of associated with the chemicals, and people were getting cancer, and there was all kinds of egregious things that were happening out there as a result of that.
Yeah.
And that's what it was intended to address, was that egregious level of carcinogen type thing. But they didn't draw the line at those. They drew the line at hazardous materials, which basically, I think you could argue that's not. That's a bottle of water. But
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, but most things are hazardous in one way or another. And so now I think it's just grown into this gargantuan.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there was a total lack of transparency. People didn't have access to information about the chemicals they were handling.
Right.
And there was a time when that was really dangerous. I mean, when I go into my clients and we talk about hazard communication, we jump through the hoops that have to be jumped through. But what I really want them to know is the basic hazards of the chemicals that they use. So most often that's going to be something that's either flammable or corrosive or an inhalation hazard, toxic, maybe things like that, I mean, when I'm talking to these employees, and no disrespect intended, but they're typically not chemists. And so when you start throwing around hazard communication terminology, like pictograms, this is a respiratory sensitizer, they're like, what the hell are you talking about, man? This is an oxidizer. What the fuck? I mean, they just need to know, how is this shit going to hurt me? So I've got this aerosol that's flammable, and I've got this torch. These two, bad, okay? This, ignition source, flammable, bad. I've got this corrosive, this, concentrate. Right. And I've got skin, eyes, bad. I mean, I don't mean disrespect, but that's what they need to know.
That's it.
You know?
That comes up in the safety data and the job hazard analysis.
Yeah.
So it's trying to if you get that part of it done, if you do that JHA and you get the chemicals that they are actually exposed to and the hazards associated with those specific chemicals, then you'll learn something. We had, probably shouldn't air my dirty laundry, but yeah, there was a situation in one of my previous employers where they had this conveyor going, and they were using alcohol to clean the conveyor, and the conveyor went under this UV light, and the UV light ignited the vapors from the alcohol that caught the rag on fire that she was holding, and it caught her on fire. And fortunately, she didn't get burned. It singed her hair a bit, and they put her out. But that obviously made the JHA. At that point, we were like, oh, this is something everybody needs to know about.
Yeah, flammables and heat sources, ignition sources.
Right.
That's what we need to talk about.
Where are they, though? It's exactly where in the process. Well, that comes up exactly when you're cleaning this conveyor.
Yes.
You cannot use alcohol here. Here's why.
That's really the information that needs to be conveyed. We spend so much time on this other stuff. Again, we talked about that in the last episode. We tend to spend a lot of time on things that may be administrative, they may be compliance related, but they're not really hazard related.
Right.
We don't have enough time in the day to spend on some of those things that just
so just find out what the hazard. What's the hazard? Ask that question. What's the hazard?
Always.
Fix that, and then look back at the OSHA standard. Do we comply? Well, we're getting closer. Okay, great. Let's keep going. But start with the hazard and address those. And
I agree. Yeah, that's good. It's interesting. I guess hopefully we will find out at some point whether or not Google will be a reasonable alternative to, a database system, a management system for all of this. I think it's how we all get our information.
Just make a list of everything you got.
Yeah, maybe that's viable. I think. You gonna try it? We'll see.
I don't know.
We'll be the test case.
I'm going to go on the record as saying I'm going to let someone else try that.
Yeah, we'll have someone else try it. Maybe in Iowa.
Yeah. Iowa seems to be.
We're going to have somebody in Iowa try it. They have, flammable torch, So anyway, good discussion as always, man.
Fun.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
You're always very generous with the information. I love the discussion. So again, guys, it's Friday, the 14th. Have a great weekend. Stay focused on the mission. It's righteous. It's worth doing right. Our employees deserve our best efforts. So keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you later.